Sorry, sir. This area is for VIP guests only. The man stood there in an old white shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers. Stopped right at the golden line on the floor, the line that separated regular guests from VIPs, the line between being welcomed in and being shown the way out. The receptionist looked up, her gaze calm but distant. There was a faint trace of contempt in her eyes. Her voice, just a little louder on purpose. Do you need me to repeat that? Her words echoed through the lobby. A few heads turned, laughter cut off mid-sentence, every eye now fixed on the black man standing motionless in the center of the showroom, silent, still, without a single word in response. But no one realized. They had just kicked the CEO out of his own company. Another voice chimed in, sharp and condescending. What seems to be the issue here, showroom director Bradley Collin emerged from the corridor beyond. Tailored navy suit, silver silk tie, the kind of confident glare that made it feel like he owned the whole building, which, in this showroom, wasn't far from the truth. Mr. Collin, the receptionist dipped her head slightly. This gentleman wishes to access the VIP section but doesn't have an appointment. Collin looked Blake over, head to toe, in just 3 seconds. His eyes said everything judgment, dismissal, and finally, sentencing. Sir, Collin said with a shallow smile, this space is reserved for verified guests only. Executives, artists, high-profile influencers. I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. Silence followed. Blake still hadn't spoken. I just want to look at the cars. He replied calmly. Of course. Collin lifted a hand. Cutting him off? Downstairs, in the public display area? There are a few more accessible models there. Might be a better fit. For your budget. As the words landed, soft laughter rippled from the VIP guests nearby. Blake scanned the room. Not a soul here knew that with a single call. This entire showroom could be shut down for operational review. But he didn't make the call. He simply nodded. Understood, he said, turning as if to comply. But as his first step lifted off the floor, Collin spoke again. Hold on, are you really just walking out of here? He turned. Security. 2 men in black suits immediately approached. Not rough, but unmistakably clear that this guest was not welcome. The receptionist tapped something on her console. The lobby lights adjusted to a new mode. Background music changed, and a soft announcement played about the upcoming Future One model showcase. Blake, now standing in the middle of a curated luxury scene, became the blemish. The dust on the showroom floor. They had no idea what they had just done. As the security guards escorted him toward the door, Blake passed by a staff member carrying a laptop. The woman named Amelia paused. Her eyes widened. She recognized him but said nothing. She bent slightly, pretending to pick up a pen she hadn't dropped, carefully avoiding Collin's gaze. Sorry again, the receptionist said one last time, voice smooth as a polished blade. Next time. If you have an appointment, we'd be delighted to serve you. Blake didn't respond. The automatic doors slid open. Sunlight poured in like a curtain drop. He stepped outside. Silent as a storm not yet arrived. Inside. Collin adjusted his cufflinks and turned to Amelia. Make a note we just dodged a mess. She said nothing. Still watching the door where Blake had disappeared, lips pressed tightly around a truth begging to explode. Outside. Blake climbed into a black SUV parked discreetly down the block. No chauffeur. He drove himself. Before starting the engine, he pulled out his phone. One message. No explanation. No emotion. Sent to just one person, Tasha. It read assemble. Blake drove slowly down Rodeo Drive, where every storefront window shimmered with luxury and everyone dressed as if they were moments away from walking a red carpet. But inside his car, there was no music, no assistant, no polite smile, just lingering silence and memories quietly resurfacing, like a scratch that never healed on the surface of polished metal. The SUV turned into the basement of a discreet office tower. No sign, no exterior cameras, but inside was the temporary headquarters of a task force no one at Lennox Motors even knew existed. Tasha was already waiting. She sat upright in the small conference room, tablet glowing with streams of incoming data. The moment Blake walked in, she didn't need to ask. Beverly Hills. He nodded, a nod that seemed to shake the whole building. Where's legal 2 minutes out? Internal showroom footage, buried complaint files, HR emails, they're all being restored. Blake took the head seat, turning his chair slightly toward the large screen on the wall. Good. But this time, we're not just handling it internally. Tasha smirked. So, what do you want to do? Expose it from the outside in. He wasn't just seeking revenge, he was rebuilding the system. A ding sounded. The automatic door opened. 3 people entered. The head of legal, the head of IT security, and a retired senior employee Blake had specifically called back for this mission. They took their seats, eyes sharp. No need for words to know this was no ordinary meeting. Blake looked up at the screen. A series of files appeared, discrimination complaints that were resolved internally. Top-performing black employees reassigned abruptly. Others who resigned without explanation. A line of text appeared at the bottom corner of the screen. Hitting like a punch to the chest, percentage of black employees in management 4%. At the Beverly Hills showroom, 0%. Coincidence, Blake asked, but no one answered. The truth was already staring back at them. Keep digging through 3 months of showroom footage, he ordered, and pull every internal interview Colin's ever been part of. Suddenly, the screen flickered. Malik, the head of IT, frowned. I found a clip that was deleted 2 weeks ago. It's encrypted. No one's touched it before. He hit restore. The speakers buzzed, then cleared. No, I already said it. Don't let those guys touch million-dollar cars. Got it? I did it. A silence dropped into the room like a vacuum. Colin's voice, no doubt about it. The words weren't just discriminatory, they were demeaning. And they'd been said in a conference room where no one had spoken up. Timestamp, Blake asked. 3 months ago, just before a black VIP customer named Marcus was denied a test drive. The engineer that day, Blake continued. Malik tapped a few keys. Nathan Cross, resigned a week later. Blake leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on the white wall ahead of him, as if seeing through the paint to all the rot beneath it. Get me Colin's full file, Tasha asked quietly. What are you planning? Blake didn't answer immediately. He checked his watch, calculating something. We're starting rehearsals for the new model launch, right? Yes, Future 1. Beverly Hills will be the first stop. Press, VIP clients, global live stream. He smiled, for the first time since walking in. That smile wasn't for anyone in the room. It was for the collapse that was about to begin. Then let's make sure they have a launch they'll never forget. Meanwhile, at the Beverly Hills showroom, Amelia stood in front of the mirror in the staff lounge. She couldn't shake the image of Blake. Calm, silent, yet burning with outrage. She knew exactly who he was. She'd seen his photo in internal newsletters, even once listened to his keynote at the Global HR Summit. But she'd said nothing, because she remembered Colin's words from last year. If I see you being too nice to those types of customers again, I'll personally write your termination letter. Amelia wasn't weak, but she'd seen too many coworkers lose their jobs simply for telling the truth. This time, she had chosen silence. But would it be the last time? The question circled in her mind as she stepped out of the room, fingers gripping a sticky note with the name of the man who had been thrown out of the showroom that morning, Blake Lennox. At the central office, Tasha received a new message from Blake as the team continued scanning through the showroom camera logs. Early the next morning, the basement of the Lennox office was no longer just a data center. The lights had been dimmed, and large monitors lined all 3 walls. In the thick silence, every time the mouse cursor hovered over a name, an email address, or a short video clip, it felt like a direct blow to the so-called executive corporate culture. Blake stood motionless in front of the screen. Displayed was a connection map linking the senior personnel at Lennox Motors, a web of relationships with one name at its center, Calvin Knox. Knox, the strategic shareholder, the shadow hand behind numerous executive decisions, from showroom managers to product department heads. An unusually high number had one thing in common: they had all received scholarships from the same private foundation, a foundation created by Knox himself. Malik pointed to a red link on the map. This is a hidden grant that was sent to Colin 2 years ago. No one knew, because it went through 3 layers of shell companies. Blake frowned. Trace it. A money flow chart appeared from Aurora Investment Fund to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, then back into Lennox Motors labeled as Management Skills Development Support for Beverly Hills Showroom. The contract specified priority for candidates aligning with high-end visual standards. High-end visual standards, Tasha repeated, half smiling, half fuming. A polite way of saying white. Polished, and definitely not Blake Lennox in a hoodie. How could a system be so perfectly programmed to be unconsciously toxic? Blake took a deep breath. Switch to internal archive data. The woman from the legal team spoke up. We found 2 discrimination lawsuits that were adjusted by management. One involved Colin, the other, she tapped a few keys, then hesitated, was Knox, but there's no clear evidence. The call logs were deleted. The complainant dropped the case 3 days later. Blake narrowed his eyes. I want that recording, even if it's just a fragment. The legal officer nodded slowly. We're restoring data from the old server drives. They might still hold cached voice files. Tasha stood, crossing her arms. We already have enough to fire Colin, but you're not stopping there. Are you... Blake stepped toward the screen, stopping at the Beverly Hills showroom layout. He circled the VIP guest area with his finger. We're going to give them one last chance. To expose themselves, Tasha raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, the upcoming Future One launch? We'll invite a high-profile guest the press can't stop talking about. That person will live-stream the entire experience, sign a high-value rental contract for the Future One, and Colin will personally host him, Tasha added. Blake nodded. Exactly. And when the contract is signed, we'll let him tighten the noose himself. They won't realize what's happening until it's far too late. Meanwhile, at the Beverly Hills showroom, Colin stood in the conference room with a fresh espresso in hand, voice full of enthusiasm. Word is, someone with millions of followers is coming to test drive the Future One next week. The media's showing up, and if we make the right impression, I think we can push for extra funding for the Dubai branch. A young employee asked, did they give a name? The VIP guest, Colin shrugged. Nope, just that it's arranged by corporate PR. Could be a rapper, an athlete, some tech guy with a unicorn startup. Either way, prep the VIP area to perfection. We can't afford to mess this up. But the mess had already happened, and it was just waiting to be exposed. Back in the secret command center, Malik rose from his desk and approached Blake, looking serious. We managed to recover one voice recording. It's incomplete but clear. He hit play. The sound was slightly static, but sharp enough to pierce. Knox made it clear. Don't let those guys near the flagship cars. We have a brand image to protect. Got it. This isn't a community center. This is a premium brand. A second voice replied, understood. We'll screen customers before they arrive. Tasha clenched her fist. Whose voice is that? Malik answered. Colin's former assistant. Where is he now, transferred to headquarters? Blake crossed his arms. Add him to the summons list. Knox. Colin and the assistant. A microhook sparked in his mind. Those who saw and stayed silent will be invited to speak at the re-inauguration of Truth. Blake walked out of the room without another word. The team watched him go, already knowing. The real battle was just beginning. In the elevator, a new message from Tasha popped up on his phone screen. Media has been notified. All cameras will be ready. In another corner of the city, Amelia stood inside a small cafe near her home. She read the internal email about the Future One event. At the very bottom, a strange line appeared in small gray text guest identity withheld. But if you've ever stayed silent, you'll want to be there. She shivered, partly from the cold air, but mostly because she knew. This wasn't just about Blake anymore. This was about everyone who had ever been forced to stay quiet. Update from the PR team, the special guest is arriving soon. But there's no name listed in the published schedule. It's part of a reverse anonymity campaign to generate surprise buzz on social media. The assistant whispered beside him. What kind of celebrity doesn't need a name? Colin scoffed. Probably just another stunt from the creative department trying to be edgy. Whatever. As long as they live stream. I don't care. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Just not Colin's plan. A black limousine with no license plate pulled up to the main entrance. The door opened slowly. And then, Blake stepped out. No hoodie, no worn-out sneakers. Today, he wore a jet black tuxedo, a jacket trimmed with satin in soft matte, a slim black silk tie, and on his wrist, a limited edition Richard Mille watch. Something no serious car enthusiast would ever miss. Camera shutters fired like a hailstorm. Reporters fumbled in confusion. Excuse me, sir, may we have your name? Blake smiled, said nothing, and walked straight into the showroom like he had belonged there all along, on the back of his jacket. The Lennox Motors logo was embroidered faintly, but under the lights. It gleamed as if to deliver a quiet message. No one recognized him, and that was exactly what he wanted. Colin rushed out quickly, extending his hand. Welcome, it's a real honor to have you here. I'm Bradley Colin, general manager of this showroom. Blake shook his hand, squeezing gently. I heard today I could test drive the future one absolutely. Of course, Colin beamed, signaling to the staff. Bring the car around now. Would you like to live stream? We've got a full media team ready. Live stream, TikTok, a rental agreement. I'll do it all. Blake nodded. With one condition. Colin hesitated. And what's that? Blake tilted his head slightly, almost joking. You'll be the one to sign the rental contract for me. Personally. To keep it friendly. Very Lennox style. Colin laughed out loud. Of course, what an honor. The contract was printed quickly. A jaw-dropping deal, 6 months of Future One test driving for $1.2 million. The terms were standardized. Livestream was already rolling. Cameras zoomed in on every detail. Colin signed the paper. The camera caught it up close. Blake took the contract, stood tall in front of dozens of lenses and VIP guests. Very good, he said, pulling the mic closer. Now, would you kindly check the name of the renter? Colin chuckled. Of course. Your name is Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out an ID badge, held it up to the camera. To Colin, to the entire showroom CEO, Blake Lennox, Lennox Motors. 1 second, 2 seconds. Colin wasn't smiling anymore. The room plunged into a vacuum, as if all the air had been sucked out. The mic was still on. Blake continued, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. You just signed a flagship vehicle rental contract with the CEO of your own company, after you refused to serve him because he wore a hoodie. Silence was no longer enough to cover up the humiliation. Amelia, standing among the employee seating, covered her mouth. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. But more than disbelief, she felt a strange warmth coursing down her spine, that feeling when justice begins to take shape. Colin stammered, I didn't... Blake cut him off. There's one more thing. He turned the contract around and pointed to the signature line showing showroom authorization, Bradley : I believe you've just signed documented proof that Lennox Motors is in need of a full-scale reform. Blake turned to the audience. And there's one more person who needs to hear this. He gestured with his hand. The glass wall behind him slid open, revealing a private room. Inside stood a man frozen in place. Calvin Knox. The audience erupted in murmurs. One journalist leaned over to a colleague. That's the strategic shareholder. But why is he here? Blake locked eyes with Knox. It's time we talked. Calvin? Knox didn't answer right away. He stood behind the glass wall as if weighing whether to step forward or retreat. But with hundreds of cameras now pointed his way, there was nowhere left to hide. The glass wall slid open. The heavy thud of leather shoes echoed across the showroom floor. Calvin Knox, the man most people only knew from boardroom reports, stepped out as if being dragged out of the shadows by the very spotlight he once used to scrutinize others. Blake didn't greet him. He quietly stepped aside, leaving a space between himself and Colin. That space felt like a pit, and Knox walked right into it. Welcome. Calvin, Blake said, still holding the contract signed by Colin. I think you've seen everything you need to see. Knox forced a tight smile. I didn't expect you to show up like this. But you knew I'd show up, Blake replied. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was an indictment. Blake raised his hand. The LED screen behind the showroom lit up, cycling through a series of slides, photos of employees removed from the Internal Leadership Development Program, all of them people of color. Several names were crossed out with notes, rejected. Does not fit the brand image. Do you remember, Engineer Nathan Cross? Blake asked. Eyes fixed on the screen. Knox said nothing. Blake continued. He was the one who designed the active suspension system for the Future One, but he wasn't allowed on the final test team, not because of a lack of talent, but because Colin was told. Don't let someone like him appear in the brochure. I believe you issued that directive? Knox frowned. I didn't directly order anything like that. You know I don't leave traces. Exactly, Blake said, and raised his hand again. An email appeared and recovered from an old backup server. From Calvin Knox to Bradley Collins, subject Future One testing team text. Make sure the test team doesn't damage the brand image. Don't let polarizing elements dilute the premium message. That email doesn't convict me, Knox said, face unreadable. How about this? Tasha stepped forward from the audience, holding a USB drive. The screen changed. A video began playing. A recording from a corporate party 2 years ago. Knox was speaking to a small group, champagne glass in hand. Lennox Motors is a premium brand. We sell the dream of wealthy white America. Don't let anything cloud that image. We're not selling cars, we're selling superiority. The noise in the showroom evaporated. The crowd of reporters seemed to stop breathing. Colin tried to take a step back, but Blake turned toward him. "And you, Colin, you didn't just refuse to serve me, you stole an idea." Another slide appeared Nathan Cross's project file. The prototype of the steering wheel touch response system. The same tech Colin had presented at the Lennox Global Conference as a breakthrough innovation from the Beverly Hills showroom team. Blake continued coldly. Colin plagiarized, stole intellectual property, and pushed the original creator out of the system. There was nowhere left to run. No excuse left to give. Colin muttered, "I was just following directives." "And now," Blake interrupted, "you'll be held accountable for each and every one." He turned to face the entire showroom. "I'm Blake Lennox, and as CEO, I hereby suspend Bradley Colin from his position as general manager of the Beverly Hills showroom, pending internal investigation." Camera shutters exploded like thunder. "And as for you, Calvin Knox," Blake locked eyes with the man who had once pulled strings over the company's future like a puppeteer, "I invite you to attend the extended shareholders meeting this afternoon, because it might be the last time you still have a seat at the table." Far away, Amelia stood among the employee crowd, eyes wide. A coworker beside her whispered, "Do you know that guy?" She shook her head, but inside, she knew. She didn't just know him. She had stayed silent when she saw him thrown out of this very place. The press conference hadn't yet ended when a man suddenly stepped forward toward Blake. Security moved to stop him, but Blake nodded. The man approached, handing him a folder. Original audio logs from the HR server. Untouched. Blake opened it, flipping through quickly. One quote leapt off the page. Quiet, but heavy. Even if he's the CEO, if he dresses like someone from the projects, he doesn't deserve to be served. Blake looked up. "Thank you. No shouting needed, no retaliation necessary." When the truth is this clear, it speaks for itself. He picked up the mic again. "We need silence now. I'd like to invite someone not on today's guest list to come forward and say a few words." Whispers rippled through the room like waves. Blake looked toward the left row, where the spotlight had just caught someone sitting, trying to shrink away from the camera. Amelia. She flinched. No one knew who she was. But now, everyone was waiting to hear the story from the one who had witnessed it and stayed silent. Blake said softly, "You can be the first voice of a new culture or the last survivor of a collapsing one." Amelia stood up like someone rising from cold water. Her body trembled slightly, not from fear, but because she knew the moment she spoke, her life would never be the same. She walked toward the podium. The eyes on her were confused, even dismissive, just a receptionist, but only Blake nodded, his eyes saying what words did not. She wasn't just a witness, she was the turning point. Amelia looked toward Colin and Knox, then turned to face the room. "I worked under Director Colin for over 2 years. I was told not to smile at customers who didn't match the showroom image. I heard a colleague be called a black smudge on the white canvas of our brand. And I stayed silent when Mr. Lennox, the CEO, was thrown out of this place like nobody, because I was scared." She paused. The audience's gaze softened, shifting from suspicion to quiet attention, but the bigger fear was becoming someone who never dared to do what's right. And today, I don't want to be that person anymore. Applause broke out, not loud, but resonant. Blake stepped back up to the podium. He didn't offer praise, didn't put an arm around Amelia, just looked at her with complete respect. Then he turned to Knox. "Have you heard enough?" Knox clenched his fists. "You won the performance. But you forget, I'm a strategic shareholder. I own 30% of Lennox. I can veto any reform you propose." "That's true." Blake nodded. "If you still hold those shares." Knox scoffed. "I haven't sold a single share, but shareholders don't have to sell. They can transfer ownership through holding funds." Blake raised his hand. "And from stage left." Tasha stepped out with 2 representatives from major investment firms. On screen appeared newly signed contracts Aurora Private Fund, holding 14. 5% Unity Equity Partners, holding 10.5%. Blake continued, "I've spent the last 6 months rebuilding the ownership network that Knox once hid behind. These 2 funds, along with a group of independent shareholders I've been working with, now control a combined 51.7%. And today, I'm consolidating that block under one name, Lennox Legacy Trust." Knox's face was drained of color. "Impossible. I have veto power." Blake shook his head. "No, you used to." He signed the document in front of him. As the new representative of the controlling interest in Lennox Motors, I hereby revoke Calvin Knox's voting rights in all upcoming shareholder meetings, and summon an internal hearing on the grounds of abuse of influence, executive manipulation, and systemic discrimination. Tasha handed a printed copy of the decision to Knox and said coldly, "You're still a shareholder, but no longer in power." The entire showroom went still. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay quiet. They had just witnessed a corporate coup, not carried out in the shadows, but in the full glare of global media. Knox looked around, searching for allies, but every face had turned away. Colin stepped back as if he didn't even know him. His former assistant, the one who once covered up the misconduct, had vanished from the front row. No one spoke, and in that silence, Knox realized he wasn't undone by power, but by truth. One hour later, at the extended shareholder meeting, Blake sat at the head of the table. In front of him were the very people who once ran Lennox, who had nodded along with Knox's decisions, who had pretended not to hear the things they heard most clearly. He didn't yell, he didn't pound the table. He simply laid out 3 documents: the immediate suspension of Calvin Knox, the termination of Bradley Collin, for ethical violations and intellectual property theft, a cultural overhaul plan titled Inside Out Leadership. "We're not going to tweak policies," he said. "We're going to rewrite the entire system." A senior board member frowned. "You really think you can do all this alone?" Blake smiled. "I'm not alone. I have a team that isn't afraid of being fired, isn't afraid of being disliked. And more importantly, they believe that integrity is worth more than quarterly dividends," a younger executive asked. "So what's the next step?" Blake didn't answer right away. He pulled out his phone and opened an old photo of a boy named Blake Lennox, standing next to a beat-up Lennox car on the edge of a poor neighborhood. Eyes lit with dreams, he turned the screen toward them. The next step is making sure that boy is never kicked out of a showroom just because his skin doesn't match the lighting. CEO Blake Lennox publicly stripped strategic shareholders of power during the launch of Future One. Social media exploded. A short clip capturing the moment Bradley Collin bowed his head and Calvin Knox froze in place racked up 12 million views in just 4 hours. The hashtag #DriveWithRespect hit #1 nationwide. But while the media drowned in this corporate drama, Blake Lennox sat quietly in a small meeting room. "No press, no cameras, no need for PR on this meeting," he said to Tasha. "But this is the moment the public needs to see you act, not just strike back." She pushed back. Blake looked up, his eyes sharp. "Tasha, I don't need people to see me act. I need this system to act even when no one's watching." She nodded, slowly beginning to understand. Not every strike needs a spotlight. Some strikes are better delivered in the dark where buried memories wait to be brought into light. The meeting began. On the table were 3 thick folders, legal reports, HR proposals, and a list of previously internally resolved complaints, each one a record of a truth that had been erased. "This is the Inside Out Leadership Initiative," Blake began. "It's not a marketing campaign, not a slogan with a sad backstory. It's a process of acknowledgement, acceptance, and restructuring." A department director asked. "You mean, we're digging up the past?" "No," Blake replied. "I want the people who lived through that past to step forward and retell it." Amelia, the former receptionist, was officially nominated as the program's first representative. She would receive training, support, and full authority to hold anonymous listening sessions across all levels of the company to gather unfiltered insights not filtered through HR. Why her a board member frowned? Because she once knew what was wrong and stayed silent. Blake answered, "Just like this system once knew and chose not to listen. No one could argue that logic. What had once been hidden needed to be exposed by those who had seen it firsthand." Days later, inside the main auditorium of Lennox Motors, Blake stepped onto the stage for a major press conference. The hall was filled with reporters, former employees, loyal customers, and those who had once walked away after losing faith. "Today," Blake began, "we're not relaunching a car, we're relaunching the culture of Lennox. Not to ask for forgiveness, but so we never need to be forgiven again." A journalist stood up. "Do you think suspending Collin and Knox is too light of a consequence?" Blake paused. "No," he said, "because I don't believe in punishment for show. I believe in structural change. A car is only beautiful if its frame is solid, and a system is only worth preserving if its failures have nowhere left to hide." That quote was recorded and within hours. It became the official campaign poster of the company's culture reboot Rebuild, so you never need to be forgiven. Elsewhere, in a small garage in Oakland, Nathan Cross, The engineer once pushed out of the development program. Watched the press conference replay on his laptop. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were red. On the desk in front of him, his early schematics for the adaptive suspension system, and a photo of Blake standing with the original R&D team of minority engineers. His phone rang. Unknown number. He picked up. "Hi. This is the assistant to Blake Lennox. Would you be open to having coffee with the CEO next week? There are some designs we think deserve to have the rightful creator's name on them." Nathan sat in silence for a moment, then nodded, even though no one could see it through the phone. That evening, as the city lights began to stretch across the long roads of Los Angeles, Blake stood alone atop the headquarters tower. He didn't look at the lights. He looked into the reflective glass where the faint silhouette of a black man once thrown out of a showroom now stood at the center of the empire he rebuilt with his own hands. He remembered the first thing Colin had said to him. "Sorry, sir. This area is for VIP guests only." And then, Blake smiled. "Well then," he whispered, "let's redefine what VIP means." His phone buzzed softly. An email from a global investment fund. They were ready to back his upcoming social innovation initiative, but they wanted something never revealed to the public before. Blake typed back, short and firm. "Wait for it. I'm about to drive what no one else dared to design." 1 week later, at the TED Global stage in San Francisco, the lights dimmed, then rose just in time for Blake Lennox to step into view. No headset mic. No dramatic entrance music. Just a man in a simple ash-gray suit, standing in a halo of light, beside a tall stool and a small bottle of water. And yet, to the thousands sitting in silence and the millions watching via live stream, he didn't need anything else. The story he brought was already heavy enough. He didn't begin with a quote. He began with a memory. "When I was 10 years old, my mother once said to me, 'We can't afford a car, but we can afford enough dignity not to bow our heads while walking.' I didn't fully understand it at the time. I just knew that every time we walked past a Lennox showroom, I looked up at it like it was a cathedral, a place of worship for a religion I was never allowed to join." The auditorium was breathless. And then one day, I owned that company, but the first thing they did when I walked into the showroom I helped build was escort me out. He smiled, not bitterly, but freely. "So, I didn't burn the place down. I didn't sue. I didn't get revenge." He looked straight into the camera. "I rebuilt a system where no one has to bow their head because of their skin color, their style, or where they began." Everyone saw a part of themselves in that. Everyone had been doubted or had doubted someone else. Blake went on to recount the entire Beverly Hills incident not as a scandal, but as a case study of dignity in the modern world. Every detail, every move, not told to boast, not told to dramatize, just told like a survivor explaining why he's still standing. "I could have used power to shut down the showroom. Instead, I used values to change how the showroom sees people. And that doesn't start with budgets or boardroom charts. It starts with a receptionist brave enough to tell the truth, an engineer who didn't give up on his design, and a CEO who had enough patience not to shout to be heard." Applause began to ripple through the room, but Blake held up his hand to stop it. He wasn't done. "I'm not here to tell an inspirational story. I'm here to announce a beginning." He tapped the screen behind him. A new logo appeared. "Drive Forward Initiative Dignity is the new engine. We're launching a support fund for technical education and leadership training specifically for young people of color from underserved communities. Kids who've never even sat behind the wheel will be taught how engines work, how companies are built, and how to dream big without needing anyone's permission. We're not looking for investors. We're looking for co-founders of the future." The audience rose to their feet. No cheering, no hysteria, just quiet standing like saluting a leader who had just stripped the stage clean of performance. After the talk, Blake stepped backstage. His assistant handed him a large, black envelope unmarked. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "I once believed dignity was something you displayed in front of a crowd. Thank you for reminding me that sometimes. It's what you hold quietly in the dark. C. Knox." Blake folded the letter and placed it on the table. He didn't say anything. He didn't need forgiveness for Calvin Knox. But deep down, he knew a system only truly wins when the one who once manipulated it begins to change. 2. That night, in a hidden garage beneath Lennox Motors HQ, a single car sat under a white sheet. No one besides Blake and a handful of trusted engineers had ever seen it. He stepped forward and pulled back the cover. The Lennox Future One Justice Edition. The first model was designed entirely from Nathan Cross's original sketches. The engineer once sidelined for being off-brand. No large logo adorned the body. Only one small phrase was etched into the steering wheel. Respect is the new horsepower. Blake stepped inside and started the engine. The LED cabin lights glowed softly. The HUD displayed a destination Oakland Community Center, youth leadership workshop, no security detail, no press entourage, no speechwriters. The first journey of the unreleased car wasn't for media buzz, but for the kids who had once stared through showroom glass, thinking they didn't belong. The wheels rolled gently out of the garage,